We're on page 99. We're still on the first page, the first paragraph of the Shemone Esrai, the silent prayer we say 3 times a day. And we have already looked at, skimmed the surface. There's a verse at the beginning, my Lord, open my lips, that my mouth will declare your praise. We spoke about speech being the essence of the human being, not reason, but speaking, bringing the spiritual into the physical. We didn't speak about the fact that the verse says that we're going to be engaged in praise. That's not obvious because a lot of the text of the Shemone Esrai is devoted to petition, asking God for things. And we'll have to explain when we get there how that's related to praise. Here, the only thing that's said is that what we're going to do is to praise. And then we talked about blessing and what the name of God connotes and our relationship to our ancestors, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we spoke about the 3 qualities of loving kindness, justice, and the combination of the 2 of them. And we're now up to the supreme God. As I pointed out to you, the 3rd line you have G-O-D, and here you have G-O-D again. And those words are in Hebrew there, the name of Aleph Lamed, which we associated with power and loving kindness. Now, if you have that name at the beginning, you have the God with Aleph Lamed, then great, mighty, and awesome, and then that name again with the qualification supreme. So it means that name describes something that could be at different levels. And at the beginning of the phrase is at one level, at the end of the phrase is at a different level, a much higher level. And what we said yesterday is that this name, because of power, is associated with loving kindness again. And we talked about different types of loving kindness. Someone passing by on the street and sees someone in trouble and offers to give him a hand. A teacher can express loving kindness to his students. A neighbor for a neighbor. A father for his children. In all cases, the interaction will be to the benefit of the recipient, but there won't be the same type of interaction, especially a father for his children. The child will feel that this adult cares about me, is committed to me, is identified with me. He won't feel that from the passerby or from the neighbor or not necessarily from the teacher. So even though in all cases A is doing something to B that benefits B is better off, B is helped, but the quality of the loving kindness is different because of the different types of relationship. So here, where it says Aleph Lamed, and it says from on high, supreme, it's coming from that higher place, which I've spoken about yesterday, means Father. That's the highest relationship that we have, that we picture, the respect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. There's another element here. I've said to you a couple of times, and we'll repeat it again now, that when we speak about G-O-D, or the Creator, we're talking about the ways in which He relates to us, because that's all that we are capable of understanding. The nature of the agent behind the way He relates to us is something that's we're not capable of understanding, conceiving, describing. Elyon here, I think, is also a response to the fact that we gave 3 descriptions. We mentioned 3 qualities: great, mighty, and awesome. Don't make a mistake. They aren't descriptions of what He is, they're descriptions of what He does. He is Elyon, He's transcendent. He's beyond our ability to understand altogether. And I said yesterday, I want to repeat it again, when people hear this, they think, boy, that sounds like a cop-out. You know, you're just telling me that you can't really tell me what God is, and you're placing Him beyond rational understanding, it calls into question the whole project, if it has that kind of weakness built into it. Well, for those who are impressed by science, not everybody is, maybe not everybody should be, but for those impressed by science, that's exactly what light is in quantum mechanics. All you describe is what it does, and indeed, you only describe what it's probable to do too. You can't predict what it will do exactly. And the way in which the descriptions are framed, there's nothing that we know that can do the things that it does. So it's just, we know what's going to happen when you run an experiment. But what's going through the experiment and making it happen that way, so far is off limits. That doesn't call into question the whole of modern science, because they're talking about something where they can describe its effects but can't tell you what it is. Sometimes the world is like that. Sometimes things are like that. So we shouldn't be embarrassed by having that understanding of our relationship to the Creator. Then we said, bestows beneficial kindnesses. That means kindness where you can see that it's a kindness, not like a blessing in disguise where at the moment you think it's a terrible bad turn, but then it turns out to be good. And we're up to the phrase, creates everything. Now here, our helpful friendly translator avoided a big problem. And what he says isn't wrong, but it isn't what the words mean. The words in Hebrew, konei hakol, mean either possesses everything or acquires everything. A kinyan is how you come to be the owner of something. You come to be the owner of something. Ownership is a big problem. What does it take to be the owner of something? First of all, is it just legal? Legal systems, which are created by people, also have rules of ownership. Maybe the whole thing is arbitrary. It's just something that is conventional. Certainly different societies regulate it in different ways. And maybe the whole thing is just a conventional social thing, a social construct, like some people like to say about arithmetic and about existence and so forth and so on. Or is there something independently real about ownership, something which doesn't depend upon a social context at all? Something about it's a fact about the world that someone owns something. So it's controversial. John Locke had a very powerful example, I think, of the idea that ownership is not dependent upon convention. Imagine the following kind of a case, he said. Imagine a person goes to a piece of land that isn't part of any domain. Now, this was 350 years ago, so there were places like that. No government is there, no nation claims it, it's just wilderness. And let's say he sows wheat, and the wheat grows, and he tends it, and then when it's ripe, he harvests it, grinds it into flour, and bakes a bread. This takes 8 months. Finishes baking the bread, he puts it on the table to cool, and then the masked man, riding a black horse from the old Western movies, comes riding in and scoops up the bread from off the table and rides off into the sunset, chuckling evilly. Has anything gone wrong here? Is there any problem here? Anything happened which would have been better if it didn't happen? I think the natural thing to say is the masked man stole his bread, right? I mean, he took his bread. He shouldn't have done that. What made it his bread? There's no society there, no laws there, no legislature there, no country there, no social constructs there. He's just out there in the wilderness all by himself, and this guy comes along and takes the bread. From this, John Locke said, you see that we can recognize an idea of ownership even without social constructs, even without societal regulations. Okay, if you are impressed by that, as I said, it's controversial, but if you're impressed by that, the next question you ask is, so what does it take to make you the owner? And here, Locke has an explanation of his case, and from which he tries to derive a rule, mixing your labor with nature and so forth and so on. It's complicated, and there are difficult cases. But one thing's for sure. If someone creates something from nothing, then it's his. That's a clear case. I'm sure you didn't notice the potential for Lassie on the table here. But she's right around the corner. Watch. 1, 2, 3. Bang! And there's the dog on the table. No reduction in mass energy from anywhere. A net gain in mass energy. One dog worth. Because I made it out of nothing. I just willed it into existence. That's definitely my dog. Maybe trading and capturing and are controversial, but if you make it out of nothing, it definitely belongs to you. So here, if we describe God as the owner of everything, the question will be, how did he get to be the owner of everything? And the answer is, he got to be the owner of everything in the most obvious, definite, absolute way, by creating everything. And that's why your translator wrote, who creates everything. Not because the word in Hebrew means create, the word in Hebrew means owner. But the translator is describing what makes him the owner. So it's not, I'm saying it's not wrong. It's just if you're looking for a literal translation of the word koneh doesn't mean to create. It means to be the owner of. Now, why would we put that here? Why is that important? It's important because being the owner of something gives you a certain moral authority with respect to that thing. That's why when the masked man comes and steals the bread, he's done something wrong, because since the farmer who sowed the wheat and baked the bread, since it's his bread, you can't do anything to it without his permission. And the masked man didn't ask for permission, just scooped it up and rode off into the sunset. So being owner gives you a certain moral authority over how the thing shall be used. And this has very deep implications for how we understand God's relationship to the world, and in particular, God's relationship to us. I was brought up in ancient history about 3 generations ago, because I'm 106, in American Reform. And one of the standard ideas of American Reform then, which could be today as well, is that there are 2 types of commandments in the Jewish tradition. There are moral commandments and ritual commandments. Moral commandments are very important. If you violate a moral commandment, then you're immoral, and that's not good. Ritual commandment? If you violate a ritual commandment, I guess you're not a ritual, which, you can take it or leave it. It's not a matter of much matter. This is wrong for a number of reasons, and one is, what it leaves out is that we have a moral relationship with God. And that being the case, if God commands us to do something or to refrain from doing something, he may be asserting moral authority that he has, in which case the ritual commandments are also moral. The outsider here thinks of morality as governing relationship between person and person. Okay, if you're Peter Singer, you think it's person and animal. And if you go even further, it's people and plants. And there are even people who want rights for rivers and rights for planets. Okay. But what they forget is that, given that there's a creator, there's a moral relationship to the creator also. So one of the principles, there are many, but one of the principles of the moral relationship is ownership. God created and sustains the existence of the world. He, therefore, is its owner. I'm not going to talk now about whether he owns us. That's an interesting question. It's somewhat controversial. There are philosophical positions which would say that can't be. It's impossible in principle. So I'm leaving it on the side. But he owns the trees. He owns the oceans. He owns the airspace. So now let's translate that into the commandments that he gives us. God says, you're Jewish, no cheeseburgers. Translation, the cheese is mine, the meat is mine, and I'm not giving you permission to use it by eating it. Which means that a Jew who eats a cheeseburger is doing something morally wrong. That's real serious. This is not just a take it or leave it item of Jewish ethnic identification. Of course, this is based on the idea that there is a real creator, but that's not a shock, is it? You did know that the Jewish religion believes in the creator of the heavens and the earth. Take a look at the first verse in the 1,000 pages of the Hebrew Bible, and that's what it says. So, that being the case, saying that God is the creator of the universe and therefore owner of the universe carries very strong moral implications. I think that's one of the reasons why it's placed in here. Are you with me so far? Now, gratitude has the same status. Gratitude is a moral principle, and that means that someone who benefits me, I owe him something. Let's suppose somebody saves my life. 3 weeks later, he says, can I borrow $5,000? At the same time, someone from down the street asks me if he could borrow $5,000. Let's say I only have $5,000 to lend, and let's say I flip a coin. Is that okay? No, that's not okay. This one saved my life. I owe him a lot. Guy from down the street, I may owe him something, but this guy saved my life. It's morally delinquent to flip a coin between someone to whom you have a great debt of gratitude and someone who you don't. The principle of gratitude says whoever benefits you, you owe him something. It isn't limited to God. And if there were no God, it would still apply to the parents that help you, teachers that help you, friends that help you. But when you compare the amount of benefit that you receive from the various people who do well for you, God is certainly on the top of the list. So when God tells you to do something, you ask, is what he's asking me to do within the debt of gratitude that I have to him? Chances are it is, since you owe him your life and your strength and all your resources and your abilities and everything else. In which case, if you refuse to do it, you're again morally delinquent. And gratitude is already in the text of the bracha we've been studying, and it will come up again and again. So this orientation is a very, very fundamental orientation. I, coming from a Reform background, it took a while for me to learn this and appreciate this. And it gives a different cast to the sum total of the Torah, the mitzvos of the Torah, that at base they have a common moral status. That's not all they have, and there are things that differentiate them, but this they do have in common. They all have a moral basis. Are we together? Okay. Let's go to the next phrase here. Okay. Who recalls the kindnesses of the patriarchs. Recalls. Golly, why would you say he recalls something? Remembers something? Are we to infer if it recalls this, he doesn't recall other things? That's why you're telling me? Not like the other ones that he doesn't recall. This one's different. This one he does recall. That doesn't sound right. But then, what's it supposed to mean? So I'll teach you what it's supposed to mean. Take the blue books here. This is really very important. Thank you. Take a look on page 1253. This is the second chapter of the book of Esther. Now, in the first chapter, we have a story of Achashverosh's bash, a 6-month party. Los Angeles could learn a thing or two. And at the end of the party, he has a 7-day celebration for the people in the capital who are close to his seat of authority. And at the end, he poses a challenge to the queen, with whom he's had some friction and some competition. And she spites him publicly, and he takes counsel with his advisors what to do about it. And they say to depose her, and they create a whole anti-feminist spin on the events, which are sold to the kingdom as a whole, and she's removed as queen. Removed. Fine. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2 starts, after these things, when the wrath, the anger of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, that's the queen's name, and what she had done, and what she had been decreed against her. How shall we read this? He remembered. Does that mean in the interim he forgot? No, I haven't seen Vashti in the palace the past couple of weeks. Where has she been? She in Acapulco running up the credit card? Oh no! Now I remember. Yeah, right. There was that party 4 months ago, and we challenged her, and then she rebelled, and then we kicked her out. This just slipped my mind. That's not plausible, is it? He didn't forget that he kicked her out of the being queen. So here you understand the word remembered means he's going to use a past fact for a present decision. That isn't what remembered means in English, but that's what lizkor means in Hebrew. Sometimes it means just to use a past fact to make a present decision. Now he's decided to get a new queen. On the basis of the fact that the old one rebelled and they threw her out, he's now going to take action to repair the situation. I suggest to you that since here is an uncontroversial use of the verb for a human being, and that's what it's got to mean, that when we use it with respect to God, it should mean the same thing. Not that he remembered, and implying he remembers this but doesn't remember that, as weaknesses in his memory, but he's using the past fact as a feature of a present and future decision. We ask God to remember things in the prayers. Here we're describing God as Zocher Chazdei Avos. Zocher is present tense, so that means he remembers. That's a continuous state. He's remembering the kindnesses of the fathers, which means that whatever he does, always the kindnesses of the fathers are part of the decision process. They're always relevant. He's always taking them into account. So it doesn't have any phony implications about the weaknesses of his psychology. It's rather a description of his decision-making, pointing out that this feature is something that's permanent. That means one of the many things that the patriarchs accomplished with their lives was to create this relationship with the Creator, where their lives become, in particular the kindnesses in their lives, become that platform for later decisions. Now, the question that arises here is, what kindnesses of the fathers are we talking about? What in particular that they did that's kindness are we talking about? Well, the text, when it describes their lives, talks about their relationships to other people, talks about their interactions, and there are many cases where you could see kindness. And that's true. That's definitely on their record as kindnesses that they do. But the Talmud says, who is a chassid? Now, for those who have a little Hebrew, chassid is a word based on the root chesed. Chesed means loving kindness. So chassid is a practitioner of loving kindness, a person whose theme of life, or one of his themes of life, is loving kindness. Ezeu chassid, who truly deserves that title of being a practitioner of loving kindness, Hamischasedim kono. He does kindness to his Creator. So now we have to think, does kindness to his Creator? How could that be? What do you mean? He's doing things to God, that's kindness to God? Now, those of you who have been here for the past few days, remember that we talked about this. When did we talk about this? With respect to which word? Kindness. Which word of this text here did we discuss where we talked about us doing kindnesses to God? Okay, let's review. The very first word, Baruch. Yeah. And your English translator says Baruch means? Blessed. Blessed. And we asked, what does it mean, blessed? Is that active or passive? Are we saying that the one who's blessed gives blessing or receives blessing? Receives. He says it means received. Blessed means something else blessed him. Now what is a blessing? A blessing is something that's active. Say again? Active?
You're currently giving a blessing.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The blessing that you give, you're right. Blessing can be the activity. It can be, with the ing, it's ambiguous in English. It can be the activity or it could be the result of the activity. So here, let's talk about the result. A blesses B. B receives a blessing from A. What is this blessing that he receives? In general, it's something that's good. A blessing is something that's good for someone, really benefits him. That's where the phrase in English, blessing in disguise, comes from. Blessing in disguise means what happened, boy, was I upset. Boy, was I angry and disappointed. 5 years later, I looked back and said, it was terrific. It was really terrific. I'm just reading now about the history of American-Israel relations, in particular, the attitude that America and much of the rest of the world has for Israel's active military operations, and very consistently, they're against them. Very consistently, they warned against them and condemned after they do them. And a decade or two later, they come around and say, we're very glad that you did it. Bombing the Iraqi atomic reactor, which at the time was condemned by all of the West, including America and all the rest. 1991, someone in the American authorities sent a tribute to the person who was the head of the Air Force, saying, we thank you, you did a great job for us when we went into Iraq. It was very good they didn't have nuclear power. So they appreciated it, in the end. So they understood that even though they condemned it at the time, for them it was a blessing because it made their job easier. So that's the idea of a blessing. So when we talked about that, we asked, what do you mean you're going to do something good for God? If he's receiving the blessing, then we're giving the blessing. You're going to give a blessing to God? How are you going to do something good for God? In particular, does he need anything? Is he lacking in some way that you could benefit him in some way? That's a good question. It's a very good question. And I told you an explanation, which I said does about 60% of the work. There's other work to be done to fill it out entirely. But one of the ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to us, his self-description to us, the way in which he positions our relationship, is that he created the world for a purpose. The purpose was that it should develop in certain ways. He didn't finish the development. He started the development and left it unfinished. And he invited us to be his partners in finishing the development of the world. So he has a project, and we are invited to contribute to that project. Well, if we make a contribution to that project, we're doing something that's good for him, because it's his project, and we're pushing it forward. So given that picture, yes, it is possible to give a blessing to God. And that's what's meant here when it says that God remembers the kindnesses of the fathers. That includes the kindnesses to other people, but it also includes the kindness that they did for him, the cases in which they pushed themselves to do something which was extraordinarily challenging, extraordinarily difficult, because he wanted it for the sake of the contribution that it will make to perfecting the world. Those are kindnesses that they can do for him, and their kindnesses to him were also spectacular, and that's what he remembers. He remembers both types of kindness, that they embody kindness in the world, and that fact that they created that platform of kindness in the world is a continuous factor in the decisions that he makes in running the world thereafter. Okay? That's what those 3 words in Hebrew mean, on the surface anyway. Now, the next phrase brings a redeemer to their children's children for his name's sake. You notice in English, they capitalize redeemer. I wonder why they do that. I guess maybe they're thinking of some specific person rather than redeem with a little L, a little R, which would mean anyone who happens to redeem. It's not clear because we have a concept of redemption which isn't specific in this way. The capital R seems to indicate they're thinking of the Mashiach.
Could be Moses, though, also.
Okay. It could be Moses. It could be David in a certain period of time. It could be Ezra in a certain period of time. And there's a blessing that we will get to, Yez Hashem, which says it, which says that redemption is a process which applies to local difficulties also, not just ending the whole period of history and ushering in a new era and be a platform for the world to come, but being redeemed from local difficulties also is called redemption, and the person is called a goel. Indeed, in halakha, if someone sells his field, he has a right to buy it back, and the buyer cannot refuse to resell it over a period of time. And not only he can do it, but relatives can do it also. And they can force the guy who bought it to sell it back to him. And he's called a goel. Now, in order to understand that, I have to say one more word about the idea of redeem. Redemption and salvation aren't the same thing. Salvation just means I'm in trouble and I get out of the trouble. Whichever way I get out. Trouble is erased, I'm saved from the trouble. Redemption always means going back to a prior condition. If you think about it, although we don't use the word often, that's what redeem means in English. When you go into a performance and you check your coat in the coat closet and the person there gives you a ticket, that ticket enables you to redeem your coat when you go out. You're getting it back. You're the owner, you put it there and you're getting it back. When you pawn something, it's the same thing. When you pawn an object, you get paid a certain amount. The person running the pawn shop will either sell it or he won't sell it. And if you come back and pay a certain amount, you can get back the item that you put in the pawn shop. That's also called redemption. So when we talk about goel in Hebrew, geula, redemption, it always means going back to some prior condition that we were in before. That means a better condition, a condition where the current pressures aren't applying to us. So, if you're talking about being in exile, as the majority of Jews in present are in exile, they're not in the land of Israel. Redemption could very simply mean coming back to the land of Israel, where at one point in time all the Jews of the world lived. When you're under pressure, even geographically, when you're the land of Israel, you're under the pressure of other powers and other interests and other cultures and so on and so on. Redemption could mean going back to the time of David, and particularly Solomon, where we were, so to speak, on the top of the world. Other nations came to study our wisdom. Other nations appreciated the greatness of our set of ideas and set of practices and values and priorities. It was a time of peace, 40 years of peace, prosperity. Like one of the verses says in Deuteronomy about the prosperity that we're promised, it says, when you take in a crop, you will empty out the old crop from your storehouses, so you'll be able to have a place to put the new crop, which means the old crop was so plentiful, you couldn't use it up. So I think it's the Shem Yishmuel that says, so what is exactly the blessing in that? Well, what are you going to do with the old crop that you're taking out, which is still good? You'll sell it. And you'll sell it cheap because the new crop came in already. If you sell it cheap, a lot of people are going to be attracted to buy it. And then you can talk to them. And you can have an effect on them. You can influence them. You can introduce them to higher ideas and higher values and higher priorities. So the blessing there is that the extra food is a bridge, a cultural bridge, so that we can bring the knowledge of Torah to the world which doesn't possess it. So all of this is the idea of bringing a Redeemer can mean when you are under local pressure. You know, the Jews in Tehran are sitting Shiva because of the death of that monster. Why are they sitting Shiva? Because they're in Tehran, that's why. Because everybody has to be unhappy that that monster died. They're living in day-to-day terrible, terrible pressure. They have to do things which are, in Jewish terms, absolutely absurd in order to just stay alive. So redemption for them would mean being recovered from that terrible pressure to a situation where they had autonomy, which we had in this land, we had under David and Solomon, we had it in various times. So again, always redemption means going back to some future, some past condition. We say, I'll show you this inside. When we put the Torah back in the ark, this is Ashkenaz, okay. If you take a look on page 149, this is what we say when we put the Torah back in the ark, and towards the bottom of the page, the line above the gray line, it says, "Bring us back to you, Hashem, and we shall return. Renew our days as of old." Now, if you're sort of paying attention, you know, the red lights start flashing. They're new and old. But yeah, you're putting us in a condition which is new and old. How could it be new and old? Well, it depends upon how you got there. If you were placed somewhere when you're 11, and then you're distanced from there when you're 36, you struggle to get back there, you get back to the same place, but the first time you were placed there, and the second time you struggled and managed to get back there on your own. So you're in the same place, but being in that place isn't the same, because in the one case you were given it, and in the other case you earned it. So this is the idea of renew our days as old. We understand that it's going to be new. The intervening history makes a difference to the nature of those days. But the condition is the condition of as of old. And I'll just finish with applying this to a term that we are familiar with, Baal Tshuva, someone who returned. And the question is raised by the historians 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. That term referred to a Jew who was born into a religious family and was raised with Jewish knowledge and Jewish practice, and then slipped in something once or habitually, and then struggled to bring himself back. And he was called the Baal Tshuva, master of return, because he's returning to where he was. But when you have someone who grew up in a non-religious home and then comes to observance and commitment for the first time in his life, why would you call that return? So a couple of friends of mine wrote a book about this, and I wrote the introduction to it, and I found this Sfas Emes who said, the return is return to the kind of relationship that the soul has with the Creator that it had before it came into the world. The distancing was through the birth and the childhood and the development, which didn't have that connection. But now, when even in this world, you're committed and you're practicing, you're now connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu in a way that's similar to the way your soul was connected before it came into this world. So that too could be called return. And that's what the RE is doing there. Return means you're going back to something which was before, and that's what the RE of redeemed means, going back to something you had before. Okay, I have to quit early today because I have a meeting. I will see you, B'yas Hashem, tomorrow.